Kenny Asker, Stories from Reddit.
Before we start the video, I just wanted to remind you to like and subscribe to my channel. It will help promote my channel and ensure that I release more content more often, making it even more interesting for you all. Enjoy watching. In the 90s and early 2000s, McDonald's always ran a Monopoly game where you'd get 1-2 stickers that represented board game pieces. We ate McDonald's religiously when I was a kid, so we always played. Most of the prizes were very small. I think the most we ever won was a free meal. But some of the prizes were huge. Things like $1 million or a fancy vacation. They'd always tease you by giving you half or 2/3 of the properties needed to make a full set, so you'd think you're close to winning the grand prize when you're really not even close, because the final piece needed to make a complete set was incredibly rare. One year, we were one piece away from a prize that was worth something like $20,000. I looked at the piece we were missing and told my mum that I swear on my life, I got that piece just the other day. I'd thrown it away because I thought for some reason it was one of the common pieces they used to tease you, and I thought for sure we had it already. We searched and searched all over the house for it. We went through our trash, but of course, the day we searched for it was a few days after the garbage man collected our trash. I was absolutely convinced that I had got it the last time we went to McDonald's and must have thrown it out. So my mum literally drove us to the city dump where we searched for about an hour, trying to find signs of our garbage so we could hopefully locate that piece. We never found it, lol. Thinking back on that experience is rather hilarious to me. One, just how strange it is that the city would allow random individuals to just peruse the dump. I'm sure if anyone saw us, they thought we'd gone mad. Secondly, it's laughable that we thought we could just show up to a massive landfill that's probably at least a few square miles and miraculously locate a sticker the size of your thumb. Hands down one of the strangest, most disgusting things I've ever done. A part of me wishes we'd have actually found evidence of our own trash, dug through one of the bags, only to find that the piece I threw out was, in fact, one of the common decoys, and my memory was simply playing tricks on me. Regardless, I think it goes without saying that we still learned a few lessons that day. So I am 20 decided to visit a sex shop just to browse. As I entered, I started looking around the entrance. When I approached the counter, there was already a guy on the phone about to pay. As I passed by the counter, one of the workers, a cute redhead, singled me out and asked if I needed anything. I politely declined. She then came over and asked to see my ID. I confirmed that I needed to show it, and she quickly accepted it. I then made my way to a small room in the shop that displayed a variety of sex toys for both men and women. I noticed a cock ring and the redhead worker was standing at the counter. She asked if I wanted to know how it worked. I eagerly agreed, and she grabbed a dildo out of nowhere and placed it on the counter. She started explaining the process from the vibration to the stimulation and everything in between. As I continued exploring, she pointed out different options for couples and singles, as well as for the front or back. She maintained a cheerful and happy demeanor throughout my visit, showing no judgment or discomfort. She simply provided me with the information I needed and answered any questions I had. She then approached the shelf of male sex toys and explained the different quality levels. She highlighted that the bottom shelf, which contained the cheaper options, were not of high quality and could potentially damage the skin. I noticed a stroker and she explained how easy it was to clean, simply rinsing it out and allowing it to air dry. She mentioned that this and other products would become my trusted companions during use. After thoroughly browsing the shop, I decided to leave. However, I was left in awe of the exceptional service I had received. Despite my initial nervousness, the redhead worker had made me feel completely at ease and comfortable throughout my visit. She truly was a remarkable person. So my boss has a portfolio of clients, a few hundred of them. But here's the kicker, one of his biggest clients is his ex-wife. Yeah, you read that right. And trust me, it gets worse. Apparently, back in the day, he and his ex-wife's current husband were best friends. They did everything together: golf, poker nights, even family vacations. Meanwhile, my boss was working his ass off, pulling late nights to build his business while his wife was having a whole ass affair with his best friend right under his nose. The worst part? His own sister was the one who caught them. She walked in on them mid-action at a family gathering. Yeah, they were that bold. She didn't hesitate to blow the whole thing up right then and there. Imagine being at a backyard BBQ, sipping a beer, and suddenly your sister storms out of the house screaming that your wife is screwing your best friend upstairs. Absolute chaos. Fast forward to now, his ex and her new husband, aka his ex-best friend, own a thriving business. And guess who handles their accounting and finances? My boss. I don't know how he does it. If that were me, I'd be cooking their books just for the satisfaction. But nope, he's all professional, smiling at meetings, handling their tax planning, and acting like he doesn't want to set their invoices on fire. He never talks about it, but you can tell there's some deep-seated resentment simmering under the surface. One time, I caught him just staring at their financial statements, completely zoned out. And let's just say, when she calls the office, his entire vibe shifts. Would you ever do work for your ex if they betrayed you like that? Because I don't think I could. Hello, I'm gonna spoiler this as this story talks about suicide and other mental health related topics that might be triggering for some readers. So now that you have read this part and don't want to read anymore, I suggest you leave this post. I was 11 at the time and was in the 6th grade. It was December 13th. The morning had started off like any other day. I woke up, took a shower, got dressed, ate breakfast, brushed my teeth, put on deodorant, and OFC get my bag for school. When stepping out of my house, I got hit with the feeling of sorrow and grief, and had no idea why. I thought maybe I was just annoyed that I had school or something, but I ran down my driveway and waited for my bus. When I got to school, I put my stuff in my locker, but upon heading to the cafeteria for breakfast, I noticed that almost every kid was quiet and looked like they had been crying. Confused, I scanned for my group of friends. They were in the corner of the lunchroom, so I walk up and ask, "What is going on? Where is friend's name?" Another one of my friends looked at me and said his brother committed C1C1D last night, and he found him. I knew his brother well, and I broke down in tears, like I was unable to stand. My group of friends consoled me until the bell rang. Got to class unable to breathe, and my teacher walked up to me and hugged me, and he said, "I know, buddy, let it out. Let it all out." That entire day, we didn't do anything in terms of classwork. We prayed, cried, played games if we felt like it. At some point, I came up with an idea. I grabbed a piece of printer paper, folded it, and wrote a card. But I wanted every signature I could get on it. That card ended up having about 450 names on it. But I didn't stop there. I had overheard a small group of kids saying that they wanted to raise a bit of money for my friend and his family. So I walked up and asked if I could help them, and they said sure. And we raised almost $700 in that one day. And we decided to take our extra pocket money to buy my friend a school sweatshirt and water bottle. Now me wanting to see my friend smile when he got this, I told the kids that we should put each gift in a separate box. But for the water bottle, have a huge box. And in it are more boxes that get progressively smaller, and we did exactly that. We sent the card to his house with the money inside along with more cards. Now fast forward a week. My friend hadn't been at school this whole time. So when we heard he was going to be at school, my teacher grabbed the 2 massive boxes with gifts inside and set them on the back table. Started class with a game of heads up 7 up and then waited for my friend. Once he entered the room, he was showered with hugs. He was smiling so big. He then said, "You guys are crazy for those cards and that money, especially the one with all those names." We laughed and were crying. But my teacher handed him a box. He opened it and it was the sweatshirt, and he started to cry, but then he was given the other box. He opened it, but was dumbfounded when he saw another box. He opened that box. Well, what do you know? Another box. He opened 8 smaller boxes just to get a water bottle, and he was laughing so hard. He then looked at us and said, "I love you guys." As friends, of course, and we all just laughed. I went home that day happy. I told my mum, and she got quiet for a moment and left the room. Not even a minute later, she came out crying and hugged me and said, "God gifted me with you, and I am thankful." I'm telling this story here because I don't know where else to tell it. People think I'm lying, but I'm not. This is a story, and it has all the trappings of a fictional story. It just happens to be entirely true. I lived on a street called Chestnut in Cypress, California in the early 1980s. There was a guy on that street named Fred. Fred had a car kit he was building in his garage, and I'd go over once in a while to talk to Fred. One day, Fred started telling me a wild story about there being people in the world called savants, basically people who have astounding amounts of skill in a particular area. There were memory savants who can memorize entire books. There were musical savants who could pick up an instrument they'd never touched, and within an hour, they could play as if they'd studied their entire lives. Later that night, I asked my dad if savants were real. I was only about 5, so I knew Fred might be pulling my leg. I'd already been interested in his story, but once my dad confirmed that savants are definitely a real thing, my interest increased. Sometime later, Fred brought up the topic of savants, and this time I asked him a question. Was he a savant? Is that why he was telling me all this? What Fred told me was that he wasn't born a savant, but that one day he was working in his garage and he'd fallen and hit his head and spent some time in the hospital. Supposedly, in the days and weeks after this event took place, Fred claimed to notice new abilities. On the one hand, he was less talkative and more introspective. On the other hand, he could suddenly remember everything. Everything. He could tell you what he had for breakfast on July 7, 1973. He could tell you what was in the newspaper that day. Basically anything that happened to him, he could remember. I didn't know what to make of that, but I was fascinated to hear this story. Savants weren't all we talked about. We talked about baseball, we talked about happenings in the world. His wife and/or daughter would sometimes sit and talk with us. Sometimes he'd be working on the car while I chatted him up, other times he'd sit and chat with me. He showed me how some of his tools work, etc. So one day, Fred told me that because of his experience where hitting his head turning him into a savant, he'd been studying the phenomenon of savants, and he'd learned that head injuries sometimes trigger savant abilities. But he also told me that scientists had discovered that there's a certain kind of ray they can zap you with that basically inhibits a part of your brain that normally works to block the savant abilities that exist in all people. Sidebar: what Fred actually told me that day is that transcranial magnetic stimulation has been proven to artificially induce savant syndrome. Fred never talked to me like I was 5, he always talked to me like I was an educated adult. I wasn't one, but I liked being talked to that way. I didn't understand what the hell he was talking about, but I had seen cartoons where scientists use rays to zap abilities into people, superheroes, etc. The Hulk was my frame of reference. I still didn't know why Fred was telling me any of this, but after hearing the new part, about him being a savant, made me think I shouldn't tell my dad about that part of the story. Not because he'd be upset for any reason, but simply because Fred had made it clear to me that people don't like savants. At best, they treat them like freaks in a freak show, but at worst, they accuse them of being witches or having dark magical powers. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I felt Fred was somehow communicating to me that this was supposed to be something I didn't repeat or talk about with others. Time marched on and I grew older. I learned to read. I became interested in baseball cards. I was obsessed with the Dukes of Hazzard. Another thing happened too. A kid named Tiger, who also lived on Chestnut, had taken to sometimes joining Fred and me in our garage talks. One day, Fred asked our parents if he could take us to get ice cream. He took us to 31 flavors. As we sat and ate our ice cream, Fred told us that he isn't really building a kit car in his garage. There's a car. He started building it, but what he had actually been working on was a machine that can turn some people into savants. He said it works a little bit on anyone, that he'd been able to make his daughter quite good at math when she hadn't been before. But he also told us that on other people who already had certain exceptional abilities, his device unlocked truly miraculous results. It made certain people better at certain things. Fred asked us if we'd be interested in trying it ourselves. He told us to think it over. He told us it was safe. He told us we could ask our parents' permission if we wanted to, but that we didn't have to do that. On the drive home from 31 Flavors, I asked Fred a question. Why did you ask us? We aren't the only kids in the neighborhood who go into your garage to talk. He thought about it for a brief moment, and then he said some words that I'll never forget. I picked Tiger because his dad tells me he might end up being a professional golfer someday. He can already beat some grown men, and he's only 6. And I picked you because whenever I pick up one of your baseball cards and ask you how many hits Pete Rose got in 1976 or whatever, you usually know the answers. That's pretty amazing for a kid your age. Tiger and I both agreed to be zapped. Fred explained we just had to sit still under what looked like some sort of metallic salad bowl for about 10 minutes. He said that if we did that for about 10 minutes, once a week for about 6 weeks, that we might become savants. I remember thinking it seemed like way more than 10 minutes. And I remember thinking it seemed like way more than 6 weeks. But one day he told us we were done. I told him it didn't work, I wasn't a savant. Fred laughed and told me that's not how it works. He said to give it time. My family moved away from Cyprus later that year, and I never saw Fred again. I went back there a couple of years later to visit some friends, and Tiger still lived there, but Fred was gone. That made me sad. Did he turn us into savants? I have no idea, but the other kid turned out to be Tiger Woods, who you may have heard of. If I'm a savant, I'm the saddest savant ever. I have a freakish ability to remember sports stats, though my interest switched from baseball to basketball a bit later. I sometimes amuse or even frighten my friends with my ability to recall stats. I can't say it's ever done me any good, but it's impressive to people at times. Did Fred actually zap us with something? Or was it some kind of inspirational trick to get us to believe in ourselves? Or was it something else altogether? I'll never know, but I don't think I'll ever be able to stop wondering.